this go full screen. What's up, everyone? If you can hear us, it's because we're live. I bet that was hard to figure out. But Captain Obvious, we're just making sure that we're live. We're confirming, and we are. Wonderful.
Smash the like button if you want to hear more Captain Obvious.
If you want to hear Captain Obvious and some of my best work, you know what? I've just realised I've got to turn my lights on, and it looks like you do too, Yanni.
No, my lights are on. It's just that I've got the blind open, and it's.
Okay. That's all right. That's all right. Okay, so I'm going to share this now. I'll share it to the Movement Mastermind. If you're watching this at this point in time, we would love for you to click that share button and share it to your social platform, because we're going to drop some knowledge bombs on how to avoid the number one cause of injury. Number one cause. Okay, so let's have a look.
Tell us also in the comments while you're waiting and while we're sharing. Tell us if you've how the start of your training year's gone. January's done. How are you going? You making progress? Have you fallen victim to the dive in where you left off mistake and hurt yourself already? We're going to talk a bit about that.
We sure are.
What am I doing? I'm commenting. Where do you want me to go? Twitter?
Yeah, everywhere but the Movement Mastermind Facebook group and our Facebook page. I'll do those ones.
I'm going to flip to Unity Gym and do Twitter.
Okay, now I will do it to the EverFit community, to our app community. And I think we're almost there, everybody.
What was that?
What? What was what?
I'm just having a fig jam moment.
Nice. A fig jam moment.
Yeah. All right, I've just done Facey and Twitter.
Facey, mate. I've just done everything else, so I think we are ready to rock. Looks like we are. All right. We've got 8 people watching. Oh my God. Say hello. Tell us who you are. Where are you from? What are you doing? What are you doing with your life?
We're kind of a big deal.
We're kind of a big deal. So I've got an itchy nose.
Why don't you introduce what we're talking about?
Yeah, why not? Why don't I introduce what we're talking about? In case we haven't met, my name's Rad Burmeister. I'm one of the co-founders of Unity Gym and the Unify Movement System, along with my brother Yanni, where we make people better at flexibility, strength, and fitness so that they can enjoy their best years. And if you want to know how we do that, probably one of the best things that you can do is watch our 3-part video series on flexibility. It's honestly the best work we've ever done. In 10 minutes, you'll learn more about flexibility development than you have in the last 10 years of anything you've watched on YouTube. And I really mean that. And if you haven't, tell me and I'll refund your time, your 10 minutes. Just click the link in the description of this video to watch it. So today we're talking about a really cool topic, actually, something that means a lot to Yanni and me. A couple of weeks ago, we went live and we talked about coming back to training after a break after Christmas. And one of the small parts of that live show, I spoke about this concept here, which is this idea that when you come back from training, you come back at the same level that you stopped at, meaning, you've spent months and months and months, maybe even a year, increasing your strength, flexibility, and fitness, getting to where you are before Christmas or before whatever break it is. Any break that's more than a week, we're really talking about here. And then you have this break, 1 week, 2 weeks off, whatever it is, and then you come back and you try to go pick up exactly where you left off. And let's say, for example, you spent the whole year working up to a 220-pound deadlift, and that was your best deadlift ever. And then you took 2 weeks off and you came back and you tried to do a 220-pound deadlift again so you could pick up where you left off. That is the number one cause of injury in the gym, and today we're going to talk about why.
That's right.
Hi, Dave. How are you, buddy? Thanks for saying hello.
Yeah, big shout out to Dave in the comments. Let us know if you're watching. I'm just trying to get up the Instagram feed where there was a couple of questions that came in on this topic.
I remember one of them. Somebody said this only matters for over 30s, right? Somebody said that.
It certainly doesn't. It certainly doesn't. And frankly, this is something that I wish I had learned a long time ago. And I guess what we should probably preface before we go into this discussion is just the concept of load management and what that actually means. And I really like the metaphor that we learnt from our good friend Phil White from ADPT Physio, who spoke about load management like a vessel that holds water, like a cup. When you start out your training journey, we refer to training journey or training age every year that you've trained under consistent conditions at a reasonably high intensity, you add a year to your training age. So let's say you've been training for 12 months consistently in the gym, doing the same style of training, the same, it doesn't work if you do a month of strength training, then you do a month of running, and then you do a month of cardio, bloody trampoline or Pilates. It's got to be consistent in the same modality of training. Do that for 12 months, you're 1 year old, your training age. So what Phil used to say is as your training age increases, so does your cup, the size of the vessel that holds the water. And everything that you do that puts physical stress on the body is similar to pouring water into that cup. And if you take on too much physical stress, so you train too hard, and that stress can be as a result of, one incidence of lifting too much weight, or it can be many instances of not having enough recovery. So you're training the same muscle group too quickly without enough recovery between, exercise stimulus. It can be a number of different things. It can even be what you do outside of the gym in your everyday life. Like, let's say hypothetically, you do a really big deadlift session on Friday, and then on Saturday, you decide to go help a mate move into their new house, and you're lifting and carrying heavy furniture all day on Saturday. That could overload your lower back and take on too much. So there's all these different factors that you've got to take in. But what's really most important to understand is your training age dictates the size of the amount of load that your body can take. We call that your load capacity. And then everything physical that you do throughout the day is adding load to your body. It's adding stimulus. It's adding stress. And if we visualize that vessel or cup, the moment that you pour too much water in and it overflows, that's when we experience either a painful muscle spasm or a muscle tear or a worse injury,
And of course, like load tolerance is different to the individual. Like Yanni can take a much bigger load than the rest of us.
Yeah, well, look, as once you've been training for a few years and your training ages, 5 or 10 years, then your cup really is more like a bathtub. You can take a lot more physical stress before the bath overflows. And if you're anything like me, pouring baths for my kids my bathtub overflows all the time because I go in and turn the taps on, and then I go into the kitchen and start cooking dinner and forget that I've turned the bath on and come out and the whole place is flooded.
But I've got
But
I've got this wrong so many times. Like I can think of, and we're really fortunate that we've got Phil as a friend, right? Like our friend Phil, the physio, because
hey, I'll tell you what, we're really fortunate that we've got royalty in the house. We've got Simon Morgan on the live stream.
Simon's in the house, ex Unity gym member superstar. Yeah, it's funny. I think it was Leroy. Leroy's a friend of ours who's a physio, one of the best sports physios in the world, and he came into the gym one day. He was filming some videos for his one of his side hustles, and as he was leaving, and I was going to get some lunch, and he was talking to me about this research, and he was talking about how in athletes the number one cause of injury is this idea where I'm going to get the x-axis right now. If this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis.
Someone actually wrote,
I know,
commented on Instagram.
Someone pointed out that on my post,
right,
I called this the x-axis and this the y-axis. So I obviously don't do axes very often. But if this is your x-axis and this is...
Rad is about as far from a scientist or a physicist as possible.
Yeah, that's it. But if this is your x-axis and this is strength going up and this is your this is your y-axis, strength going up, this is your x-axis, this is time. And so over time with training, your strength goes up, but then you stop training and time keeps going by, but your strength comes back down. It's this idea that when you come back to training, time's gone by, strength's gone down, and you try to pick back up there again. And that's where these problems happen. And Leroy was the one explaining that to me a couple of years ago. And he was saying, he was so excited about it because he was like, oh, this is this new, research that's being done and blah, blah, blah. And it's a really interesting concept that made me think, wow, I never actually thought of that. And that's something that I do a lot myself. And maybe you guys can relate. Let us know in the comments. Let us know if you can relate where you do your training and you're performing just fine. And for no reason, you come back and you try and do the workout you used to do. And all of a sudden you tweak your back or you tweak your shoulder and and it can be it can even be as much as if you do regular training and you get good sleep. And then for a couple of weeks, you're really stressed at work. You're working 12 or 13-hour days and you have a few extra drinks at nighttime. And then next week, you injure yourself at training because even though you haven't broken up how much training you're doing, your recovery isn't on point. So your recovery's messed up. And it's like, why did I injure myself? I'm lifting the same as I did last week. Well, it's because you're not recovering properly from your workouts,
Another really common scenario that I've seen over the last 20 odd years of coaching people is when the amount of time they spend sedentary in their chair changes all of a sudden really quickly. So a great example is that you've got a project on and you've got to meet a deadline and you do a week of 16-hour days in the office and your body's not used to that. When you're seated in a chair, that is a type of load or stimulus. There's certain areas of the body that are relaxed, but there are other areas of the body that aren't relaxed. And there are muscles that are shortened in that position, and there are muscles that are trying to stabilize in that position. And that is a type of stimulus that can, change the loading sort of parameters. And then when you go into the gym and work out, you end up with an almighty muscle spasm because your body's just gone, wow, you've breached my load capacity in a number of areas, and you're sort of scratching your head going, all I've done is sat on my ass all week. How have I injured myself? And people get really frustrated. And I always sort of say, from the perspective of
diagnosis,
what have you changed in your lifestyle this week? And often it'll be, they'll think nothing comes to mind because they've just sat in their chair all day grinding, trying to get something written or a project out the door. And when you dig really deep and probe and ask the right questions, it's like, yeah, I didn't exercise this week. I haven't done anything really strenuous. All I've done is been at my desk, from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. or 8 p.m. and to get a project out the door. So there's no reason why I should experience this injury, And you say, well, actually, quite the contrary. You've changed your loading parameters. You've stopped moving around. And so every time, like, let's say hypothetically, your usual routine is to spend 4 to 6 hours in the chair. And that your usual routine means that you generally go to the gym, you get a bit of strength stimulus, you might get a little bit of flexibility stimulus, and also you try to bank 10,000 steps a day like me. So you're going for a walk or a run. Well, every single one of those different activities are changing the loading variables to your body, and that change sort of spreads the load more thinly across your whole body and more evenly, so that you're less likely to trigger a muscle spasm in a specific area that might be overloaded from you just sitting in the chair all day, and so it's really just that importance of understanding that any change to your routine can have a really big impact on this. It doesn't have to necessarily be a break from training altogether, or an abstinence from exercise, or a vacation where you stop lifting, because it is very true that we lose our strength very quickly after about a week or so of abstaining from especially with strength training. Strength training it's phenomenal how, it's actually interesting, because the central nervous system, what trains the muscles, adapts for a couple of weeks after the exercise. So, we've got people in the comments of that post you made on Instagram saying, why do I get stronger for a week if I take a week off training after? Now, in most cases, that's very common in someone who trains very regularly, and they're maybe in not an overtrained state, but they're in a state where they're actually not training at their full capacity, because they're not giving themselves enough recovery. They're not having deload periods. They might have a training split that's really not ideal or optimal to give that 72-hour window of recovery between stimulus. And then when they take a week off, they actually finally get the recovery their body's been asking for, and they come back way stronger. That's very common, That's really what's referred to as supercompensation, where you overtrain purposefully. It's prescribed overtraining. Then you give yourself a prescribed extended recovery period, and then you come back and retest stronger. But in many cases, what happens if you're getting it right and you're getting the recovery right, and then you take a week or two off training, you decondition very, very quickly. But the nervous system, which is what's creating the muscle motor units and all that sort of stuff, what's creating the action potential and recruiting the muscle motor units and doing all the inter and intramuscular coordination and all that sort of thing, is actually adapting still. So you might come back in and feel like you can lift the weight, but the muscles and the tendons and the rest of it has lost conditioning, and you're more susceptible to tissue damage or injury, overstressing the tissue. So yeah, but I think it's important that we bring it.
Do you want to know the best thing about that? The best comment on that Instagram post is the guy that tagged Dorian Yates asking for his thoughts on it. Unfortunately, Dorian didn't comment on that Instagram post, but he contacted me directly to have a little conversation about it, because he really wanted to know our thoughts.
Oh, that's great. I love it. I didn't see that. I love it. Keep it going. Keep it going.
Yep. Bring Dorian Yates into. You should get Arnie into the conversation next time, mate. Give him a tag. And
What'd also be really interesting is to get someone's take who hasn't taken enough steroids while they were training to launch themselves to the moon.
That's what I was going to say if he did.
And then compare the two dialogues.
So I'd rather somebody's opinion that hasn't taken enough, like about $20,000 of steroids a month, on how you respond to taking.
Dorian is an amazingly. I have the utmost respect. He's actually a really amazing guy, and he has he's taken a really great path after his bodybuilding as well, which is really impressive.
Yeah, but I don't know much about him at all, and I am certainly not trying to discredit him because I know who he is, and he's achieved wondrous things. I'm just poking fun at the idea that somebody tagged him in one of our Instagram posts as though he was going to comment on it.
Yeah, I do think it's important to address that, though. When you're considering load management, you've got to be. I used to train alongside a lot of guys who are professional powerlifters, and like they were taking some serious performance enhancers, and they used to often say you can't try and train at the level that we're training at unless you're on PIDs,
PEDs.
uh, PEDs as well, because all these loading variables start to change, especially like there's some amazing some amazing peptides you can take and things like that are going to enhance recovery and all sorts of stuff. So, on that note, like to tag in someone who's, a professional bodybuilder who was training at an elite level, who's had a lifetime. You got to look at the average age of the Olympia bodybuilders. Most of them achieve that level in their 30s and 40s. It's very rare that you get, and I'm sure there are examples of this. So, I'm not up to date with all of the ages of the current Olympia bodybuilders, but to my knowledge, the majority of them have, achieved the highest level in their mid to late 30s and even 40s. Because it takes a lifetime of conditioning to build up to be able to train at that capacity to build that amount of muscle, and that furnishes our argument here. You've got to progressively overload, and if you have a break from training, you've got to wind it back a little bit and not start again. Of course not. The conditioning comes back very quickly.
Yeah, it does. You get back to where you were before very quickly. It's not like, if you take a few weeks off and you've got to regress back to 80% or 70% of what you were lifting, you get back up there really, really quickly. But if you injure yourself, that's when it's a real problem, because that's when you got to, and you spoke about, Yanni, in the last episode, the difference between like a tendon and a ligament injury versus a muscle injury. Because if you tear a muscle, that's bad enough, but at most, that muscle will take about 6 weeks to recover. But tendon,
a really bad tear. Like I had a really nasty hamstring tear last year that took about 8 to 12 weeks. It depends on the severity of the tear, the muscle tear.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what Rad's trying to say there is that the tissues in the body remodel at different rates. Bone is the slowest, muscle is the fastest, tendons and ligaments are somewhere in between. And it's got a lot to do with a variety of different factors. The most obvious is blood flow. A meniscal cartilage in the knee doesn't get much blood flow. And so if you destroy your meniscus, especially if it's like an internal tear, not around the outside of the meniscal cartilage, then you're in trouble, and that's the same as, any tendon that joins muscle to bone, or any ligament that connects bone to bone to stabilize. Often when you tear one of these things, it's not going to heal. If you rip I've ripped ligaments in my elbow, and they're gone. They're never going to heal, and so you got to take this into consideration. And that's another thing that a lot of people, I had a really good friend of mine call me up this week asking me, he's only just new to training. He's put on a bit of weight in his adult life, and he wants to and he's really motivated, and he wants to crush it and lose the weight and get in shape again. And he's hit the gym hard. And I knew he's got a personality very similar to me, where it's like all or nothing, and he's hit the gym real hard. He's following a different sort of he's training with a mate who uses like Center, which is a training app, Chris Hemsworth's thing. But the problem is that I don't think they have a lot of load management principle in there, or philosophy. It's just workouts, and you choose the workouts you like, and they're doing them like every day. And of course, what's happened, he's developed tendinopathy in his elbows. And it's very common, because your forearms are constantly gripping. Even if you're doing a leg day, you're still picking up the weights to put on the barbell, So if you're training 5-6 days a week, then careful consideration needs to go into how you overload areas of the body that don't get a lot of recovery. And so he called me up and said, what do I do? What's going on? And I said to him, look, man, like, you got to understand that the nervous system adapts very quickly. So you'll feel like you can lift it. And then the muscles adapt a little bit slower, but quite quick too. Within a couple of weeks, the muscle system will actually be able to lift it. But then what joins those muscles to the bone that takes months and months to evolve to the capacity that you feel like you can achieve, like already do. And so if you keep hitting it day in, day out, those tissues that are slower at adapting are going to get overloaded really, really quickly. And you end up with a medial or lateral epicondylitis, or it's very common in runners. The patella tendon gets just absolutely destroyed, and you end up with that runner's knee pain where sort of just above the kneecap or just below the kneecap. And that's because that part of the body. Another one is a classic example of this is shin splints. Runners end up, just because the bones and the tissues that are connecting all the muscles in the shins and the calf are not adapting as fast as the actual calf muscles and the nervous system and the cardiovascular system. Those things adapt in a matter of weeks, and so your ability to run distance is increasing, but the tissues that are holding your body together aren't adapting as fast, and you've got to continually remind yourself of that. Really, the way that bodybuilders get around that is that they take enormous amounts of human growth hormone, and human growth hormone speeds up that process. And so it's, going back to our friend over there on Instagram who's trying to tag in Dorian Yates. Dorian Yates might not really, he may have forgotten what it was like to be on that journey, not juicing. Like Rad and I often forget what it's like to just be starting out on the journey of physical exercise and flexibility training, because that was 20 years ago for us, and so, yeah, I don't know how much his perspective is going to be helpful.
Yep, that's it, 100%. It's that's a funny thing. Anyway, I thought it was funny. Dorian,
I think it's great. I would have loved if you had have commented.
Yeah, that would have been a good one. We've got Tony Pye.
Sorry, go on.
No, we've got Tony Pye on the live stream.
Good day, Tony.
Good to see you, Tony. Tony's had a bit of experience with overcoming injury from training with the UMS when he first started with us. Can you remind us, Tony, of what you were suffering with? Because I remember you said, I think you had knee pain or shin splints or something like that, something that was preventing you from running, and you're now running like an absolute champion. I think you've lost like 12 kilos or something like that.
Training for a marathon at the moment.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you've lost 12 kilos of fat, overcome your injury in your lower body, and you're running regularly. I'm seeing pictures all the time, which is awesome. Guys, we're going to bring it.
He's got to run 42 Ks soon.
At age 48. Knee injury, medial strain. Yeah, awesome. And as far as I know, that's all behind you, isn't it, Tony?
And that's just another example, guys. That's a medial ligament strain. So that's another example of like breaching the load capacity in the tissues that are remodeling slower than everything else. And so what you're going to find, can I try and bring this in for a landing a little bit here?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple of minutes left, so we're going to do it.
What you've got to understand, guys, the big take home from this discussion really should be that you've got to adopt a training philosophy where everything is gradually progressed, gradually, and it's progressed based on the slower tissues that adapt. So if you're wanting to get really good at pull-ups, don't go in and do pull-ups every single day of the week unless you're lifting really sub-maximal load, so that you're not really overloading and overstimulating the body. And when you start out, you might want to only start doing pull-ups once a week. And then after your first couple of training mesocycles, which for us is 28 days, you add a second day of pull-ups. Or maybe, you wait 3 mesocycles, 3 program phases, 12 weeks. But you've got to understand that your body, you do not want to breach your load capacity. The number one cause of workout-related injury is not any exercise specifically. It's a breach of your load capacity in exercise in general, okay? So many people blame deadlifts for a lower back spasm or injury. It's not the deadlift that hurt you. It's how you got there, It's a lack of load management in the build up to the deadlift. And there are different types of load management too. There's the amount of volume or intensity of a workout. But there's also micro load, which is the form and technique. How are you actually executing the movement? Because that's also going to fast track a mismanagement of load or a breach of your load capacity. If you're not lifting with good technique, then it's a surefire way of breaching your load capacity, because the body's going to know and going to go, hang on, there's something not right here. We're about to overload an area of the body that's not going to recover well from this. So it'll trigger a spasm in your lower back to slow you down and make you rethink what you're doing. And so I urge everyone out there, just try to adopt a training philosophy where you manage load. Don't blame exercise for your injuries. Blame your capacity to manage load. And if you don't really know how to do that, if you don't know how to periodize a program, or any of the stuff that we talk about on here is, confusing to you, then, start watching more of our videos, start aligning yourself with people who know what they're talking about, get a coach, join the UMS, whatever it is. You really need to adopt a training methodology where you're managing load properly. And understanding load management principles is the start. Progressive overload, super compensation, these sorts of things.
Yep, that's it. Knowledge bombs, guys. I've had a bit of a fig jam moment here. How good is my B-roll usage? Yanni's talking about deadlifts, and I've got like maximum weight deadlifts going on in the background there. Fig jam. That's all I can say.
What Tony's saying here is really important. I was a typical newbie runner and just tried going faster with every run, then blew my knee. So that's exactly right. His cardiovascular system was adapting at a faster rate than his medial ligament was adapting. And eventually what gives? The slower conditioned tissue. The tissue that's remodeling slower. So the muscles in his legs were able to carry him the distance and the speed, because they adapt the second fastest after the central nervous system and the cardiovascular system. And then, but the ligaments and bones adapt much, much slower, and God forbid, if it wasn't the medial ligament that went, it could have been, a bone issue. We get people with bone spurs and all sorts of stuff who have just absolutely hammered themselves. So yeah, look, try to avoid it. It's not fun, but if you do end up finding that you've breached your load capacity, I know a really great program that helped Tony get back on track, and I'm sure it'll help you as well. And there's a link in the description for it if you want to learn more.
Absolutely. But look, if you want to know, if you honestly want to learn more about flexibility in 10 minutes, then I really mean this, then you will have in a long, long, long time. And that goes for our UMS members as well. So, Simon and Dave and Tony, you guys should watch this, because Yanni and I put a lot of effort into really condensing the lessons about flexibility that the UMS uses, but it'll give it to you guys in 10 minutes. Click the link in the description of this video to check out the 3-part video course and tell us what you think. And like and subscribe to the channel if you're watching this and you, shameless plug, Tony. If you're enjoying this and you...
Never shameless if it works, and it's a good product.
That's right. And we will get your questions in. If you're watching this late and you got any questions about injury, about anything like that, get them in, because your questions help us shape the content for these shows. So we will continue to answer your questions and do shows on topics that you want. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and we will see you next time.